Hello there, and welcome to Sleepify Science. Tonight, we drift far back in time to a world before cities, before machines, before memory itself. A time when the first humans walked the earth, learning, adapting, and quietly shaping the story of us all. They didn't have words for civilization or technology, but they had fire, they had curiosity, they had each other. Every sound of the forest, every spark in the dark, every mark on a cave wall was a small step toward the future we live in now. Early humans were explorers of survival, discovering how to hunt, how to share, how to dream. Through their eyes, the world was new. Through their hands, it began to change. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through science and time, I invite you to like, subscribe, or simply rest your thoughts for a while. For now, breathe deeply, let your mind slow down, and let the story of our earliest ancestors guide you gently into sleep. Let's begin. Long, long ago, before there were cities or farms or even houses, the world looked very different from the way it looks today. If you could travel back in time millions of years, you would see thick jungles and open grasslands stretching as far as your eyes could see. In these wild places, our ancient ancestors were just beginning their incredible journey. These early humans were not like us at all. They looked more like apes, with long arms, hair covering most of their bodies, and faces that would seem strange to us now. But inside their heads, something amazing was happening. Their brains were growing larger, and they were learning to think in new and clever ways. The very first human-like creatures appeared in Africa around 7 million years ago. Africa is often called the cradle of humanity because this is where our story begins. These early ancestors lived in trees, swinging from branch to branch, just like monkeys do today. They ate fruits and leaves, and they made sounds to communicate with each other, though they could not speak words like we do. Their hands were perfect for grabbing branches, and their feet could grip onto trees really well. Life in the trees was safer because dangerous predators like big cats and wild dogs roamed the ground below. But as time passed, the weather started to change. The thick forests began to shrink, and more grasslands appeared. This forced some of our ancestors to spend more time on the ground, and this changed everything. Walking on 2 legs instead of 4 was one of the most important changes that ever happened to our ancestors. Scientists call this bipedalism, which is just a fancy word for walking upright. When early humans started walking on 2 legs, it freed up their hands to do other things. They could carry food, pick up sticks, and hold their bodies more easily. Walking upright also helped them see over tall grass to spot predators coming from far away. At first, they were not very good at walking on 2 legs. They probably wobbled and fell down a lot, kind of like how a baby learning to walk stumbles around. But over thousands and thousands of years, their bodies changed. Their legs grew longer and stronger. Their feet became flatter and better for walking long distances. And their spines curved in a special S shape that helped them balance. This was a huge advantage because it meant they could travel farther to find food and water. The African landscape, where early humans lived, was both beautiful and dangerous. Imagine vast plains covered with golden grass that swayed in the wind. There were scattered trees that provided shade from the hot sun, and rivers where all kinds of animals came to drink. Early humans shared this land with incredible creatures that would seem amazing to us today. There were elephants even bigger than the ones we see now, with tusks so long they almost touched the ground. Giant rhinos stomped through the grasslands, and huge herds of antelope ran in massive groups that stretched as far as you could see. But there were also terrifying predators. Saber-toothed cats with teeth as long as kitchen knives hunted for prey. Massive crocodiles lurked in rivers and lakes, waiting to snatch anything that came too close to the water. Packs of wild dogs worked together to bring down large animals. Early humans had to be very careful and very smart to survive in this world. Finding food was the biggest challenge that early humans faced every single day. Unlike us, who can just go to a store or open a refrigerator, they had to search for every meal. In the beginning, they ate mostly plants. They picked fruits from trees, dug up roots from the ground with sticks, and collected nuts and seeds. They also loved eating termites and other insects, which might sound gross to us, but were actually very nutritious. Sometimes they would find an animal that had died naturally or been killed by a predator, and they would eat the leftover meat. This is called scavenging, and it was risky business because they had to compete with vultures, hyenas, and other scavengers. They had to work fast before the dangerous predators came back. Early humans learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make them sick. They learned where to find water during dry seasons and where different animals liked to gather. All of this knowledge was passed down from parents to children, and it helped them survive. As early humans spent more time on the ground, they began to notice something interesting about stones. Some stones were harder than others, and when you struck them together in just the right way, sharp pieces would break off. These sharp pieces could cut through tough animal hides and slice meat much better than fingernails or teeth could. This discovery led to the creation of the very first tools, and it changed everything. The oldest stone tools that scientists have found are about 2.5 million years old. These tools were very simple, just rocks that had been hit with other rocks to make sharp edges. But to early humans, these tools were like magic. With a sharp stone, they could cut meat from dead animals much faster. They could scrape hides to make them softer. They could dig up tough roots more easily. They could even cut branches from trees. Making these tools required thinking ahead and planning. You had to find the right kind of stone, hit it at the right angle with the right force, and have a picture in your mind of what you wanted to create. This shows that early human brains were becoming more advanced and capable of complex thinking. Living in groups was absolutely essential for early human survival. A single person alone in the dangerous African wilderness would not last very long. But a group of people working together could accomplish amazing things. Early human groups were usually small. maybe 20 to 50 individuals, including children. Everyone in the group was related to each other in some way, like one big extended family. The group would travel together, searching for food and water. When they found a good spot with plenty of resources, they might stay there for a while. When food became scarce, they would move on to a new location. Within the group, different people had different roles. The strongest and most experienced adults would keep watch for danger. Others would search for food or take care of the young children. When someone in the group was sick or injured, others would help them. This cooperation and caring for each other is one of the things that makes humans special. Many animals will abandon members of their group who cannot keep up, but humans take care of each other. Communication was becoming more and more important for early humans. At first, they probably made sounds similar to the grunts and calls that apes make today. They might have had different sounds to warn about different types of danger, like one sound for a predator on the ground and another sound for a bird of prey in the sky. They also used body language, using their hands and faces to express emotions and ideas. Over time, these sounds and gestures became more complex. They started to develop a simple form of language, though it was nothing like the complex languages we speak today. Being able to communicate meant they could work together better when hunting, warn each other about dangers more effectively, and teach their children important survival skills. Parents could tell their children which plants were poisonous and which were safe. Experienced hunters could explain to younger members of the group where certain animals liked to go and how to track them. This sharing of knowledge made the entire group smarter and better at surviving. The brains of early humans were growing larger with each generation. Scientists can measure this by looking at fossil skulls and seeing how big the brain cavity was. The earliest human ancestors had brains about the same size as modern chimpanzees, roughly 1/3 the size of our brains today. But over millions of years, human brains got bigger and bigger. A larger brain meant more thinking power. Early humans could solve more complex problems, remember more information, and plan further into the future. They could imagine scenarios that had not happened yet and figure out the best course of action. For example, they might remember that last year during the dry season, there was still water at a certain location far away, and they could plan to travel there when needed. This kind of thinking requires a sophisticated brain. Scientists believe that eating more meat helped human brains grow larger because meat provides lots of protein and nutrients that brains need. The invention of tools also pushed brain evolution forward because making and using tools requires careful thinking and coordination. Fire was one of the most important discoveries in all of human history, but early humans did not discover it right away. For millions of years, our ancestors were afraid of fire, just like other animals were. When lightning struck and started a wildfire, they would run away from it. But gradually, some clever early humans noticed that fire had benefits. After a wildfire passed through an area, they might find cooked animals that had been caught in the flames, and the cooked meat tasted better and was easier to chew. They might have noticed that predators were afraid of fire and stayed away from areas where fire burned. Eventually, probably around 1 million years ago, some early humans figured out how to keep fire going by adding sticks and grass to fires started by lightning. They would carefully carry burning sticks from place to place, keeping the fire alive like a precious treasure. Later, they learned how to actually create fire themselves by striking certain stones together to make sparks, or by rubbing sticks together very fast until friction created enough heat to start a fire. This knowledge was so valuable that it had to be carefully guarded and passed down through generations. Having control of fire transformed early human life in incredible ways. Fire provided warmth on cold nights, which meant humans could survive in cooler climates that would have been too harsh otherwise. Fire kept dangerous animals away because predators are naturally afraid of flames. Early humans could set up camps with fires burning around the edges, creating a safe zone where they could sleep without worrying about being attacked during the night. Fire provided light after the sun went down, extending the day so people could spend more time making tools, preparing food, or socializing with each other. But perhaps the most important use of fire was for cooking. When you cook food, it becomes softer and easier to chew and digest. It also kills harmful bacteria and parasites that can make you sick. Cooked food allowed early humans to get more nutrition from what they ate. Tough roots that would have been nearly impossible to chew when raw became soft and tasty when roasted in fire. Meat that might have contained dangerous bacteria became safe to eat when cooked. Some scientists think that cooking food was so beneficial that it actually helped human brains grow even larger because the body did not have to work as hard to digest food. So more energy could go to feeding the hungry brain. Early humans had to deal with all kinds of weather, and they had to be very resourceful to stay comfortable. Unlike many animals that have thick fur coats to keep them warm, humans lost most of their body hair as they evolved. Scientists think this happened because walking long distances under the hot African sun could cause overheating, and having less hair helped the body cool down more efficiently. Humans have more sweat glands than most animals, and sweating is a very effective way to cool off. But losing hair created a new problem when the weather turned cold. Early humans had to find other ways to stay warm. They sought shelter in caves when they could find them, though suitable caves were not always available. They also created simple shelters by leaning branches against each other and covering them with leaves and grass. These shelters were not fancy, but they blocked the wind and kept out rain. As early humans became better at making tools, they learned to scrape animal hides clean and use them as blankets or primitive clothing. Wrapping yourself in an animal skin might not sound comfortable, but it was much better than freezing. These innovations in shelter and clothing eventually allowed humans to spread into parts of the world that had colder climates. The teeth of early humans tell us a fascinating story about how they lived. Scientists can examine ancient teeth and learn all kinds of interesting things. By looking at what kind of wear and tear the teeth show, scientists can figure out what kinds of food early humans ate. Teeth that are heavily worn down suggest a diet with lots of tough plant material. Teeth with particular patterns of scratches might indicate eating meat regularly. Some ancient teeth even have tiny grooves that show the person used their teeth as tools, perhaps to hold onto things while their hands were busy doing something else. Early human teeth were larger and stronger than our teeth today because they needed to chew tough, raw food. They did not have soft bread or cooked pasta like we do. The molars, which are the big flat teeth in the back of your mouth, were especially large and powerful for grinding up plant material. As humans learned to cook food and their diets changed, their teeth gradually became smaller over many generations. Ancient teeth also reveal health problems. Some fossil teeth show evidence of cavities, gum disease, or other dental issues, proving that even our ancient ancestors had to deal with tooth problems. Early humans had to be incredible walkers and runners. Unlike us, who ride in cars and buses, they traveled everywhere on foot. Some scientists believe that early humans were some of the best long-distance walkers and runners that have ever existed. They could walk for hours under the hot sun, covering many miles each day in search of food and water. Their bodies were perfectly designed for this. They had long legs relative to their body size, which made walking efficient. Their feet had special arches that acted like springs, storing energy with each step and releasing it to push off the ground. They could sweat profusely, which allowed them to cool down even while exercising in hot weather. Most other animals cannot do this and have to stop and rest frequently to avoid overheating. Some scientists think that early humans used a hunting technique called persistence hunting. This is where you chase an animal for many hours, not trying to catch it right away, but just keeping it moving so it cannot rest. Eventually, the animal becomes so exhausted and overheated that it collapses, and then the hunters can approach safely. This technique requires incredible endurance, but humans are uniquely suited for it. Even today, there are some traditional hunters in Africa who still use this method successfully. The hands of early humans were becoming increasingly special and useful. If you look at your own hands, you will notice something amazing. Your thumb can touch the tip of each of your fingers. This is called an opposable thumb, and it gives humans incredible dexterity and precision. Early humans were developing this ability, and it allowed them to do things that other animals could not. They could grip tools firmly and use them with accuracy. They could pick up small objects like seeds or berries using just their fingers. They could make delicate movements needed for crafting tools or preparing food. The human hand has more than 30 separate bones, dozens of muscles, and thousands of nerve endings that send detailed information to the brain about what the hand is touching. When you close your eyes and touch something, you can often tell what it is just by feel. You can tell if something is hot or cold, rough or smooth, hard or soft. This incredible sense of touch helped early humans navigate their world. When making stone tools, they could feel exactly how hard to strike the stone. When examining a plant, they could feel whether the fruit was ripe. These might seem like small things, but they made a huge difference in survival. Water was just as important to early humans as food, maybe even more so. A person can survive for weeks without food if necessary, but can only last a few days without water. Early humans had to know where to find water in their environment. Rivers, lakes, and streams were obvious sources, but these were not always available, especially during dry seasons. Early humans learned to read the landscape for clues about where water might be. They noticed that certain types of plants only grew where water was near the surface. They watched where animals went to drink and followed them to water sources. They learned to dig holes in dry riverbeds because sometimes water was still flowing underground even when the surface was dry. During rainy seasons, they might collect water in whatever containers they could find, like hollowed-out logs or large shells. Water sources were also dangerous places because that is where predators often waited, knowing that prey animals would have to come drink eventually. Early humans had to be very careful when approaching water, checking for signs of predators and staying alert. Despite the dangers, they had no choice but to seek out water regularly. Their survival depended on it. The children of early human groups learned by watching and imitating the adults around them. There were no schools or books, so everything had to be learned through experience. Young children would follow their mothers everywhere, watching how they gathered plants and prepared food. As the children got older, they would help with simple tasks, like carrying light loads or watching for danger. Boys might go with the men on hunting expeditions, first just watching from a distance, then helping in small ways, and eventually becoming skilled hunters themselves. Girls learned from the women how to identify edible plants, how to prepare food, and how to make simple tools and containers. But the learning went beyond just practical skills. Children learned the social rules of their group, like how to share food fairly, how to resolve conflicts without fighting, and how to cooperate with others. They learned which places were dangerous and which were safe. They learned the stories and knowledge that had been passed down from previous generations. This education lasted their entire childhood and even into young adulthood. By the time someone was fully grown, they had accumulated an enormous amount of knowledge about how to survive and thrive in their environment. Early humans faced injuries and illnesses just like we do, but they had no doctors or hospitals to help them. When someone got hurt, the group had to take care of them using whatever knowledge and resources they had. If someone cut themselves, they might press leaves or grass against the wound to help stop the bleeding. For minor illnesses, they might have learned that certain plants could help. For example, chewing on certain leaves might settle an upset stomach, or a particular root might help with a headache. Of course, they did not understand why these remedies worked. They just knew through trial and error that sometimes they did. Archaeological evidence shows that some early humans survived serious injuries. Scientists have found fossil bones that show signs of healing after being broken. This means the person lived for weeks or months after the injury, long enough for the bone to start repairing itself. This probably would not have been possible if the person was alone. Someone had to bring them food and protect them while they were too injured to move around normally. This is evidence that early humans cared for each other and did not abandon those who were sick or hurt. This compassion and cooperation is part of what makes us human. The climate was constantly changing during the time of early humans, and they had to adapt to these changes to survive. There were ice ages when the Earth became much colder, and glaciers covered large parts of the northern continents. There were also warm periods when temperatures were similar to, or even hotter than today. These changes happened slowly over thousands of years, but they had huge effects on the environment. During cold periods, forests might shrink and grasslands expand, or vice versa. The animals that early humans hunted would migrate to new areas following the plants they ate. Water sources might dry up, or new ones might appear. Early humans had to be flexible and adaptable. They could not just keep doing things the same way their ancestors had done, because the world around them was changing. Groups that could adapt to new conditions survived and had children. Groups that could not adapt died out. This constant pressure to adapt and change drove human evolution forward. The humans who were most intelligent, most creative, and most capable of learning new skills were the ones most likely to survive and pass their genes to the next generation. As hundreds of thousands of years passed, early humans continued to evolve and change. Their brains kept growing larger, and their bodies became more like modern humans. Different species of early humans existed at different times, and scientists have discovered their fossils all across Africa and eventually in other parts of the world too. One important species was called Homo erectus, which means upright man. These humans stood fully upright, just like we do, and they were the first to have body proportions similar to modern humans, with relatively long legs and shorter arms. Homo erectus appeared about 2 million years ago, and they were very successful, surviving for over 1.5 million years. That is much longer than modern humans have existed so far. They were skilled tool makers and were probably the first humans to use fire regularly. They were also the first humans to leave Africa and spread into Asia and possibly Europe. Fossil evidence of Homo erectus has been found in China, Indonesia, and other Asian countries, proving they were great travelers and explorers. The tools that early humans made became more sophisticated over time. The earliest tools were just rocks with sharp edges, but gradually, humans learned to make more specialized tools for different purposes. They created hand axes, which were teardrop-shaped tools that fit nicely in the palm and could be used for chopping, cutting, and scraping. These hand axes were made with great care and skill. The toolmaker had to strike the stone many times in just the right places to shape it properly. Archaeological sites have been found with thousands of stone flakes scattered around, showing where ancient toolmakers sat and worked for hours creating their tools. Some hand axes were made so beautifully, with such symmetrical shapes and smooth edges, that scientists wonder if they were made to look good as well as work well. Perhaps making a beautiful tool was a point of pride, or maybe young people tried to impress others with their crafting skills. Over time, humans invented new types of tools, including scrapers for cleaning animal hides, pointed tools for digging, and sharp blades for cutting. Each new innovation made life a little bit easier and increased the chances of survival. Hunting large animals became an important part of early human life, though it was incredibly dangerous. Imagine trying to hunt an elephant or a buffalo when the only weapons you have are wooden spears and stone tools. These animals were huge and powerful, with thick hides that were hard to penetrate. An angry buffalo could easily kill a person with its horns, and an elephant could crush someone with its feet or toss them through the air with its trunk. But humans had advantages that these animals did not. They could plan and strategize. They could work together as a coordinated team. They could use their intelligence to set traps or drive animals into difficult terrain where they would be vulnerable. For example, hunters might chase a large animal toward a cliff or into a swampy area where it would get stuck. Multiple hunters working together could surround an animal and attack from different directions, confusing it and preventing it from focusing on any single attacker. After a successful hunt, the entire group would feast on the meat. Nothing would be wasted. The meat would be eaten. The hide would be used for blankets or clothing. The bones might be turned into tools, and even the sinews could be used as string or rope. Early humans developed an amazing ability to track animals by reading signs in the environment. A skilled tracker could look at footprints in the dirt and tell you what kind of animal made them, how big it was, how fast it was moving, and how long ago it passed by. They could see where an animal brushed against a bush or tree and left behind a few hairs. They could spot broken twigs or disturbed grass that showed where an animal had walked. They could examine droppings and tell what the animal had been eating and how recently. All of these tiny clues added up to create a detailed picture of where the animal was going and whether it could be caught. This tracking ability required incredible observation skills and a deep knowledge of animal behavior. Trackers had to be patient and persistent, sometimes following a trail for many hours or even days. Young people learned tracking by following experienced hunters and learning to notice all the small details that others might miss. This skill was so important that the best trackers were highly respected in their communities. Their abilities could mean the difference between the group eating well or going hungry. The development of better weapons made hunting more effective and less dangerous. Early humans started with simple wooden spears, which were just long sticks with the ends sharpened to a point and hardened in fire. These were better than nothing, but they were not very reliable. The point might break when it hit an animal, or the spear might not penetrate deeply enough to cause serious injury. Over time, humans invented ways to make better weapons. They learned to attach sharp stone points to the ends of spears, using plant fibers or animal sinews as binding material, and sticky tree sap as glue. These stone-tipped spears were much more effective at piercing animal hides. Later, humans invented the spear thrower, which is a stick with a hook or cup at one end that holds the back of a spear. By using the spear thrower to launch the spear, a hunter could throw it much harder and farther than they could with just their arm. This meant they could attack animals from a safer distance. The invention of the bow and arrow would come much later, but each improvement in weapons technology gave humans a better chance of successfully hunting large, dangerous animals while minimizing risk to themselves. Early humans learned to use every part of the animals they hunted, wasting nothing. This was partly practical, since hunting was difficult and dangerous work, but it may have also been spiritual. Many modern hunter-gatherer people believe that animals give themselves to hunters and must be treated with respect. Whether early humans felt this way, we cannot know for sure, but we do know they used everything. The meat was obviously the main prize, providing protein and fat that were essential for health and energy. The hide could be scraped clean and used as clothing, blankets, or coverings for shelters. The bones were incredibly useful and could be made into tools like needles for sewing, awls for punching holes, or clubs for hunting smaller animals. Some bones were split open to get at the nutritious marrow inside, which is soft and fatty and very high in calories. Sinews, which are the tough connective tissues that hold muscles to bones, could be used as string for tying things together. Even the bladder and stomach could be used as containers for carrying water. Horns and antlers could be shaped into tools or used as containers. By using every part of an animal, early humans showed remarkable cleverness and resourcefulness. Living in groups meant that early humans needed to develop social skills and rules for getting along with each other. When a group of people lives together closely and depends on each other for survival, conflicts are bound to happen. Maybe two people both want the same thing, or someone feels that another person is not doing their fair share of work, or someone says something that hurts another person's feelings. If these conflicts led to violence and fighting, it would tear the group apart, and everyone would be worse off. So early humans had to develop ways to resolve conflicts peacefully. They probably had rules about sharing food fairly, especially after a successful hunt. They may have had leaders or elders whose job was to settle disputes and make decisions for the group. They learned to communicate about problems before they became too serious. They developed a sense of fairness and justice. Scientists have found evidence that some early humans lived with serious disabilities that would have prevented them from contributing normally to the group's survival. The fact that these people survived shows that the group took care of them anyway, out of compassion or family loyalty. This sense of caring for each other, even when it is not immediately beneficial, is something special about humans. The landscape of Africa was always changing, and early humans moved around constantly to find the best places to live. During wet seasons, certain areas would bloom with vegetation and attract large herds of animals, making them great places for humans to gather food. But during dry seasons, these same areas might become harsh and barren, forcing humans to move elsewhere. Groups would have traditional territories that they knew well, but they had to be willing to travel long distances when necessary. Some scientists think that this constant movement and exploration eventually led some groups of early humans to wander out of Africa altogether. Maybe they were following herds of animals that migrated into new territories. Maybe population growth meant there were too many people for the available resources, pushing some groups to seek new lands. Or maybe it was just human curiosity and the desire to see what was over the next hill or beyond the next river. Whatever the reason, starting around 2 million years ago, early humans began spreading into other parts of the world, first into the Middle East, then into Asia and Europe. This was an incredible achievement because it meant adapting to completely new environments with different climates, plants, and animals. Communication continued to evolve and become more complex as early human brains grew larger and more sophisticated. The early sounds and gestures developed into something closer to true language. Scientists believe that full language, with grammar and complex vocabulary like we use today, probably did not exist until relatively recently in human history, maybe only in the last 100,000 years or so. But before that, humans definitely had some form of communication that was more advanced than what other animals use. They could probably convey specific information about things that were not immediately present, like telling others about a water source they had seen earlier or describing where an animal was spotted. They could share knowledge about which plants were safe to eat and which were dangerous. They could tell stories about past events, passing down important information through generations. Language allowed humans to cooperate on a level that no other animal could match. A group of lions hunting together acts mostly on instinct, but a group of humans could make complex plans, assign different roles to different people, and adapt their strategy on the fly based on what was happening. This made them formidable hunters and survivors. The physical differences between male and female early humans were more pronounced than they are in modern humans. Males were typically much larger and stronger than females, perhaps 30 to 50% heavier, with much more muscle mass. This size difference suggests that males and females probably had somewhat different roles in early human societies. Males, being larger and stronger, probably did most of the hunting of large, dangerous animals. Females, who needed to spend significant time pregnant or caring for young children, probably focused more on gathering plant foods, catching small animals like rabbits or birds, and taking care of children. However, we should be careful not to oversimplify. Females certainly helped with hunting when needed, and males certainly helped gather plant foods and care for children. Early human life was too challenging for strict division of labor. Everyone had to be flexible and help with whatever needed doing. The important thing was that the group worked together, with each person contributing their strengths to help everyone survive. As humans evolved and brains became larger, bobbies needed to be born earlier in development, before their heads grew too large to fit through the birth canal. This meant human bobbies were more helpless than other animal bobbies and needed more care for a longer time. This probably strengthened the importance of cooperation and social bonds in early human groups. The journey of early humans out of Africa and into the rest of the world is one of the greatest adventure stories in history. It took place over hundreds of thousands of years and involved countless generations of people. Each generation moved just a little bit farther, settling new territories and adapting to new conditions. The first humans to leave Africa probably traveled through the Middle East, which is the land bridge connecting Africa to Asia and Europe. These pioneers found themselves in landscapes very different from the African savanna they were used to. There were mountains to cross, deserts to traverse, and rivers to ford. Each new environment presented new challenges and required new solutions. In colder regions, staying warm became more important, driving innovations in clothing and shelter. In coastal areas, early humans learned to gather shellfish and catch fish, adding new food sources to their diet. In forests, they had to adapt their hunting techniques to catch different types of animals. This expansion across the world shows the incredible adaptability of early humans. While other animals are usually restricted to specific habitats where they are well adapted, humans could learn to survive almost anywhere. As early humans spread into Europe and Asia, they encountered climates much colder than Africa. The Ice Age was in full effect during much of this time, with huge glaciers covering northern Europe and massive sheets of ice extending far south. Winters were long and brutal, with snow covering the ground for months. Temperatures could drop far below freezing, making survival incredibly difficult. Early humans who lived in these cold regions had to become masters of cold weather survival. They needed substantial shelters that could keep out the wind and retain heat. Some built structures using mammoth bones as the framework, covering them with animal hides and insulating them with grass and moss. They would maintain fires inside these shelters for warmth, though they had to be careful about smoke building up. Clothing became much more important than it had been in warm Africa. They made tailored clothing from animal furs, stitching pieces together using bone needles and sinew thread. They wore layers of clothing to trap warm air against their bodies. They made boots to protect their feet from snow and ice. They probably used animal fat or grease to protect exposed skin from frostbite. All of these innovations allowed humans to survive in places where they really should not have been able to live. In different parts of the world, early humans encountered different animals, and they had to learn new hunting strategies for each one. In Europe and northern Asia, they hunted massive woolly mammoths, which were like modern elephants, but covered in long, shaggy hair and adapted to cold climates. Mammoths were dangerous prey, but a single mammoth provided an enormous amount of meat, fat, and hide that could sustain a group for a long time. Hunters also pursued woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears, giant deer, and bison. In Asia, they hunted different species of elephants and rhinoceroses adapted to warmer climates. Along coastlines, they learned to gather shellfish like clams, mussels, and oysters from rocks and beaches. They caught fish using spears or their hands, standing patiently in shallow water and striking when a fish swam close. Some may have learned to make simple traps to catch fish. Coastal living had advantages because seafood is abundant and relatively easy to gather compared to hunting large land animals. Some scientists think that eating seafood, which is rich in omega-3 fatty acids and other nutrients important for brain health, may have helped drive further brain development in early humans. The discovery that you could use boats to cross water opened up entirely new possibilities for where humans could go. The very first boats were probably just logs that people could hold on to while kicking their feet to move through the water. Then, someone figured out that you could hollow out a log to make a canoe that you could sit inside. Later, people learned to tie reeds together to make rafts, or to stretch animal hides over a wooden frame to make a lightweight boat. With boats, early humans could cross rivers that would have been impossible to swim across. They could travel along coastlines, fishing and gathering food from the sea. They could even cross short stretches of ocean to reach nearby islands. Evidence suggests that early humans reached Australia at least 50,000 years ago, and the only way they could have gotten there was by crossing significant distances of open ocean. This means they must have had seaworthy boats and the navigational skills to use them. Imagine setting out across the ocean in a primitive boat, not knowing what you might find on the other side, or even if there was land at all. It took incredible courage and adventurousness. Many expeditions probably failed, with people lost at sea. But some succeeded, and those pioneers established human populations in places that had never known humans before. Different groups of early humans began to develop different physical characteristics depending on where they lived. This is what we today call racial differences, though it is important to understand that all humans are one species and all equally human. These physical differences developed because of natural selection operating differently in different environments. For example, people who lived in very sunny places near the equator had darker skin. Dark skin provides protection from intense ultraviolet radiation from the sun, which can damage skin cells and cause skin cancer. The dark pigment in skin, called melanin, acts like a natural sunscreen. Meanwhile, people who lived in northern regions with less sunlight tended to develop lighter skin over many generations. This is because vitamin D production in the body requires sunlight, and people with darker skin need more sun exposure to produce enough vitamin D in cloudy northern climates with long, dark winters. Lighter skin was an advantage because it allowed the body to produce vitamin D more efficiently from limited sunlight. Body shape also adapted to climate. People in hot climates tended to be tall and slender, which helps the body lose heat more efficiently. People in cold climates tended to be shorter and stockier, which helps the body conserve heat. These are just average tendencies, of course, with lots of variation. The important point is that these differences are only skin deep, literally. They do not affect intelligence, personality, or any of the important things that make us human. Early humans developed increasingly sophisticated methods for storing and preserving food. In warm climates, meat would spoil quickly after an animal was killed, so people had to eat it fast or find ways to preserve it. They learned that thin strips of meat dried in the sun would last for weeks or months without spoiling. This dried meat, similar to modern jerky, was lightweight and could be carried easily when the group traveled. In cold climates, early humans discovered that meat would naturally freeze during winter and stay preserved. They could store frozen meat in snowbanks or icy caves and have food available even when fresh hunting was difficult. Smoking meat over a fire also helped preserve it while adding flavor. Early, humans learned that certain plants had properties that could help preserve food. Rubbing salt into meat in areas where salt was available helped it last longer. Some plant leaves and berries had natural antibacterial properties that slowed spoilage. Seeds, nuts, and grains could be stored in dry places and would remain edible for long periods. Some groups learned to dig underground storage pits where the cool earth kept food fresher. Having stored food was a huge advantage because it meant the group was not entirely dependent on finding fresh food every single day. They could survive through periods when food was scarce, like during harsh winters or dry seasons. This ability to plan ahead and store resources for the future shows sophisticated thinking and self-control. It requires resisting the temptation to eat everything immediately, and instead saving some for later when it might be desperately needed. Caves became important homes for many groups of early humans, especially in colder regions. A good cave provided natural shelter from wind, rain, and snow. It offered protection from predators and a safe place to sleep. Some caves had narrow entrances that could be easily defended or blocked. Early humans would choose caves carefully, looking for ones that were dry, not too deep or dark, and preferably facing south to catch warming sunlight during the day. They would keep fires burning near the entrance to provide light and warmth, and to keep wild animals away. Over time, humans modified caves to make them more comfortable, perhaps by piling rocks to create windbreaks, or by digging shallow trenches to direct water away. Archaeological excavations of ancient caves have revealed incredible information about how early humans lived. Scientists have found the remains of ancient hearths where fires once burned, stone tools left behind by the inhabitants, bones from animals they ate, and sometimes even ancient art painted on cave walls. Some caves were occupied repeatedly over thousands of years by many different generations, with layers of ancient debris building up over time like pages in a history book. By carefully excavating these layers, scientists can learn about how early human life changed over time. The creation of art was a major milestone in human development, showing that early humans were not just focused on survival, but also had imagination, creativity, and spiritual thoughts. The oldest known art created by humans includes cave paintings, carved figurines, and decorated objects. Some of the most famous cave paintings are in Europe and date back more than 30,000 years. These paintings show animals like horses, bison, mammoths, and deer, often depicted with amazing skill and detail. The artists used natural pigments made from minerals and clay to create different colors. They ground up red ochre to make red paint, used charcoal for black, and mixed different materials to create yellows and browns. They applied the paint using their fingers, brushes made from animal hair, or by blowing pigment through hollow bones to create a spray effect. Creating these paintings deep inside dark caves would have required artificial light, probably torches, or stone lamps burning animal fat. Some paintings are in very hard-to-reach places, high up on walls or in narrow passages, suggesting that creating them was very important, worth considerable effort and perhaps danger. Scientists debate about why early humans made this art. Some think it had religious or spiritual significance, perhaps part of rituals to ensure successful hunting. Others think it was a way of recording important events or teaching young people about animals. Some speculate it might have been early humans simply expressing their creativity and desire to make something beautiful. Whatever the reason, these ancient artworks prove that early humans had complex inner lives with thoughts and feelings much like ours. Early humans also created portable art in the form of small carved figures and decorated objects. Archaeological sites have yielded small figurines carved from stone, bone, or ivory, often depicting animals or human figures. Some of the most famous are small statues of women with exaggerated feminine features, which archaeologists call Venus figurines. These were made in various places across Europe and Asia over tens of thousands of years. Scientists are not sure what purpose they served, but theories include fertility symbols, representations of mother goddesses, or simply dolls or toys. Early humans also decorated practical objects like tools and weapons with carved patterns, showing that they cared about aesthetics and not just function. They made beads from shells, stones, and animal teeth, stringing them together to make necklaces and bracelets. These ornaments might have been worn to look attractive, to show status within the group, or to identify which group someone belonged to. The creation of art and decorative objects shows that early humans were developing symbolic thinking. They could create something that represented or symbolized something else. This is a sophisticated mental ability that requires imagination and abstract thought. It is closely connected to the development of language, since words are symbols that represent things and ideas. Music was likely another form of expression for early humans, though it is harder to find archaeological evidence of music than of visual art. However, scientists have found ancient flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory that are over 40,000 years old. These flutes have carefully drilled holes positioned to produce different notes when played. The fact that early humans took the time and effort to create musical instruments shows that music was important to them. They probably also made music with their voices, singing or chanting. Percussion instruments like drums could have been made from hollow logs or stretched animal skins, though these would not preserve well archaeologically. Music might have been used in ceremonies and rituals, or as entertainment around the fire in the evening, or to help coordinate group activities like working together to build a shelter. Mothers probably sang to their bobbies to soothe them, just as mothers do today in every culture. Music has powerful effects on human emotions and can create feelings of unity and togetherness when people sing or dance together. It may have played an important role in bonding early human groups and creating shared cultural identity. Burial of the dead appears in the archaeological record starting around 100,000 years ago, and it provides powerful evidence that early humans had developed religious or spiritual beliefs. When archaeologists find ancient graves, they often contain not just the body, but also objects that were deliberately placed there. These grave goods might include stone tools, animal bones, flowers, shells, or ochre pigment sprinkled over the body. The inclusion of these items suggests that early humans believed in some form of afterlife where the dead person would need these objects. Or perhaps the items were gifts to honor the deceased and show love and respect. The very act of burial itself is significant. It would have been easier to simply leave dead bodies where they fell, but early humans went to the trouble of digging graves and placing the dead carefully inside. This shows care and respect for the deceased. Some burials show bodies positioned in special ways, like curled up as if sleeping, which might represent beliefs about death as a kind of sleep from which one might wake. Early humans may have grieved their dead much as we do today, feeling sadness and loss when someone they cared about died. The capacity for grief and the rituals surrounding death are deeply human characteristics that set us apart from most other animals. They suggest that early humans had strong emotional bonds with each other and complex thoughts about life, death, and what might lie beyond. Early humans had to deal with numerous health challenges beyond just injuries from hunting. They suffered from parasites picked up from contaminated water or undercooked meat. Intestinal worms were probably common and would have caused stomach pain and diarrhea. They got infections from cuts and wounds that could turn serious without proper treatment. Tooth decay and dental abscesses caused pain and could even be fatal if infection spread. They probably suffered from arthritis and joint problems, especially as they got older, from the physical demands of their active lifestyle. Broken bones from falls or hunting accidents would have been common. Some diseases like tuberculosis have been found in ancient skeletons. Despite all these health challenges, some early humans lived to relatively old ages. Fossil evidence shows that some people survived into their 40s, 50s, or even 60s, which is impressive given the harsh conditions. Living to old age in early human societies was valuable because elderly people had accumulated a lifetime of knowledge and experience. They remembered things that happened long ago, like when and where to find water during severe droughts. They could teach complex skills to younger generations. They could provide wisdom and guidance in making difficult decisions. Respect for elders is found in virtually all human cultures and may have deep roots in our evolutionary past. The relationship between early humans and animals was complex and went beyond just hunting prey. Early humans shared their world with incredible creatures and had to understand animal behavior to survive. They learned the habits of different species through careful observation. They knew which animals were dangerous and should be avoided, which could be hunted safely, and which might lead them to water or other resources. Some scientists think that wolves may have begun associating with human camps tens of thousands of years ago, attracted by leftover food scraps. Over many generations, the wolves that were less afraid of humans and more friendly might have been tolerated around camps, while aggressive wolves were driven away. Eventually, this led to wolves being domesticated and becoming the dogs we know today. Dogs would have been incredibly useful to early humans. They could help with hunting, tracking prey, and bringing down animals. They could guard the camp at night, barking to alert people if predators or other dangers approached. They provided companionship and warmth. The partnership between humans and dogs is ancient and powerful, and it shows that early humans were capable of forming bonds not just with their own kind, but with other species as well. Different groups of early humans developed different cultures and traditions as they spread across the world. A culture is basically the way a group of people does things, including their tools, their clothes, their food, their art, their ceremonies, and their social rules. Groups living in different places faced different challenges and came up with different solutions. Over time, these differences accumulated, creating distinct cultures. For example, groups living near the ocean developed expertise in fishing and collecting shellfish, while groups living on grasslands became expert hunters of large land animals. The specific tools they made varied depending on what materials were available. In some areas, people made tools primarily from stone. In other areas, bone or wood might have been more commonly used. Different groups probably had different spiritual beliefs and different stories they told about how the world came to be and what happened after death. They may have had different styles of art and music. These cultural differences are what make human societies so diverse and interesting. despite these differences, all early humans shared fundamental similarities. They all lived in groups, used tools, controlled fire, cared for their young, and possessed the capacity for language, art, and symbolic thought. These shared characteristics are what make us all part of the same human family. Competition and sometimes conflict probably occurred between different groups of early humans. When two groups needed the same resources, like a good hunting territory or a water source, tensions could arise. Sometimes groups might have avoided each other, each staying in their own territory. Other times they might have traded with each other, exchanging tools, food, or other goods. And sometimes they might have fought over resources. Archaeological evidence of violence in early human societies includes skeletons showing signs of violent trauma, like skull fractures from being hit with a club or stone. However, evidence of violence is relatively rare, suggesting that early humans were not constantly at war with each other. Most of the time, different groups probably coexisted peacefully or simply avoided each other. Within groups, cooperation was much more common than conflict because everyone depended on each other for survival. People who were selfish or refused to cooperate would have been at a disadvantage. Those who shared food, helped others, and worked together for the good of the group were more likely to survive and have children. This may have shaped human nature to be fundamentally social and cooperative, though certainly capable of conflict when necessary. For most of human history, there was not just one type of human living on Earth, but several different species of humans existing at the same time. These different human species are sometimes called hominins, and they were all related to each other, having evolved from common ancestors. One of the most famous of these human cousins was the Neanderthals. Neanderthals were a separate species that evolved in Europe and Western Asia, while modern humans were evolving in Africa. They appeared around 400,000 years ago and went extinct about 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals were physically very powerful, with thick bones, heavy muscles, and bodies built for strength. They were actually stronger than modern humans, with barrel chests and arms that could exert incredible force. Their brains were actually slightly larger than modern human brains, though shaped differently, suggesting they were intelligent in their own way. Neanderthals were skilled toolmakers who created sophisticated stone tools. They hunted large animals like mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses. They controlled fire and used it for cooking and warmth. They took care of their sick and injured, as shown by fossils of Neanderthals who survived serious injuries that would have required others to help care for them. They buried their dead, suggesting they had spiritual beliefs. In many ways, Neanderthals were quite similar to modern humans. The question of what happened when modern humans expanding out of Africa encountered Neanderthals is fascinating and has puzzled scientists for a long time. For thousands of years, these two different types of humans lived in the same regions and would have certainly encountered each other. How did they interact? Were they enemies who fought over territory and resources? Were they indifferent to each other simply avoiding contact? Or did they interact peacefully, perhaps even cooperating and trading with each other? Recent genetic evidence has revealed a surprising answer. When scientists analyzed DNA from modern humans, they discovered that most people today who have ancestors from Europe or Asia have a small amount of Neanderthal DNA in their genome, typically between 1 and 4%. This proves that at least sometimes, modern humans and Neanderthals interbred and had children together. These hybrid children survived, grew up, and had their own children, passing Neanderthal genes down through thousands of generations to people alive today. This discovery fundamentally changed how scientists think about Neanderthals. They were not some completely different creature, but rather another type of human, similar enough to modern humans that they could have healthy children together. The relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals was probably complex, varying from place to place and group to group, with the full range of human interactions, from conflict to cooperation to romance. Eventually, Neanderthals went extinct, dying out completely around 40,000 years ago. The reasons for their extinction are still debated by scientists. It probably was not a single cause, but rather a combination of factors. Competition with modern humans may have played a role. Modern humans might have been better at some survival skills, allowing them to outcompete Neanderthals for resources. Some scientists think modern humans had superior language abilities or more sophisticated social networks, giving them advantages. Climate change during this period made survival harder for everyone, and Neanderthals might have been less adaptable to changing conditions. Disease could have been a factor, with modern humans perhaps bringing new diseases to which Neanderthals had no immunity. The Neanderthal population was probably never very large to begin with, spread thinly across a huge geographic area. Small populations are more vulnerable to extinction because there is less genetic diversity, and random events can have bigger impacts. A few bad years with harsh winters and poor hunting could devastate small, isolated groups. Over time, the Neanderthal population dwindled until there were no more. Their extinction represents the loss of a unique branch of the human family tree. We will never know what they thought about, what stories they told, or what their lives were truly like. Another cousin species of humans was the Denisovans, named after Denisova Cave in Siberia, where their fossils were first discovered. We actually know very little about what Denisovans looked like, because very few fossils have been found, just a few teeth and bone fragments. However, scientists have been able to extract and analyze ancient DNA from these fragments, revealing that Denisovans were a distinct species closely related to both Neanderthals and modern humans. Genetic evidence shows that Denisovans lived in Asia and interbred with modern humans, just as Neanderthals did. Today, some people have small amounts of Denisovan DNA, especially populations in Melanesia, Australia, and Southeast Asia. One particular gene inherited from Denisovans helps people adapt to high altitude by allowing the body to use oxygen more efficiently in low oxygen environments. This gene is common in Tibetan populations living high in the Himalayas, showing that interbreeding with Denisovans provided some modern humans with genetic advantages that helped them survive in challenging environments. There may have been other human cousin species that existed, but whose fossils we have not yet discovered, or whose remains did not preserve. The picture that emerges is of a world where multiple types of humans coexisted, occasionally encountering each other, and sometimes producing hybrid offspring. Another human cousin was Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit because they were very small, only about 3.5 feet tall. Fossils of these tiny humans were discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores and date to between about 100,000 and 60,000 years ago. Scientists think that Homo floresiensis evolved from a population of larger humans that somehow reached the island and then became smaller over many generations, a phenomenon called island dwarfism that happens when large animals are isolated on islands with limited resources. Despite their small size, they made stone tools and hunted animals on the island. The discovery of Homo floresiensis was shocking because scientists did not expect to find such a different type of human living so recently. It shows that the human family tree is more complicated and bushier than we thought, with many different branches, most of which eventually went extinct. Modern humans are the only surviving branch, but we are connected through our shared history to all these other human species that came before us or lived alongside our ancestors. We carry some of their genes within us, and we inhabit a world they helped shape through their struggles, innovations, and adaptations. The success of modern humans compared to these other human species is remarkable and raises interesting questions about what made modern humans special. We were not the strongest. Neanderthals were more powerful. We were not the only ones with big brains or tool use. So, why did we survive and spread across the entire world while the others went extinct? Scientists have many theories, but no definitive answers. Some think the key was superior communication abilities and more complex language, allowing better cooperation and sharing of knowledge. Others emphasize cultural innovations like better tools, more efficient hunting techniques, or more sophisticated social structures. Some research suggests modern humans had better long-distance running endurance, possibly making persistence, hunting more effective. Another theory focuses on population size and social networks. Modern humans might have maintained larger, more interconnected populations compared to Neanderthals and other groups, providing more opportunities for innovation and allowing beneficial new ideas to spread quickly. When one group invented a better tool or technique, it could spread to other groups through trade and social connections. This network effect meant that modern human culture could advance more rapidly. greater population also meant more genetic diversity, making the species more resilient to challenges. Whatever the specific reasons, the outcome is clear. By around 40,000 years ago, modern humans were the only human species left on Earth. Around 300,000 years ago in Africa, a population of early humans evolved into what scientists call anatomically modern humans. This means they had skeletons essentially identical to people today. If you could travel back in time and see one of these ancient people, they would look fully human. Their skulls were rounder and higher than earlier humans, with smaller brow ridges and more prominent chins. Their bodies were tall and slender, adapted for the African climate. But being anatomically modern does not mean they behaved exactly like people today. Behavioral modernity, meaning thinking and acting like modern humans, took longer to develop. For tens of thousands of years, anatomically modern humans made simple stone tools, not much different from what earlier humans had made. Then, starting around 70 to 100,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Human behavior became noticeably more sophisticated and creative. This period is sometimes called the Great Leap Forward, or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Tool technology became much more advanced and diverse, with specialized tools for different purposes. Art appeared in abundance, including cave paintings, carved figurines, and decorated objects. Evidence of trade appears, with materials like shells and special types of stone found far from their sources, showing that groups were exchanging goods over long distances. Burials became more elaborate, with grave goods suggesting complex beliefs about death and afterlife. What caused this sudden flowering of human creativity and culture? Some scientists think it was connected to the development of full modern language, though language leaves no fossils and its origins are debated. Others think it was cumulative cultural evolution, where knowledge built up gradually over generations until reaching a tipping point where rapid innovation became possible. The invention of new technologies accelerated as human populations grew and cultures became more sophisticated. One important innovation was the needle, which might not sound impressive, but was actually revolutionary. Needles made from bone or ivory with an eye for thread allowed humans to sew fitted clothing. Previous clothing was probably just animal skins draped over the body and tied in place, which kept you warm but was bulky and awkward. Sewn clothing could be tailored to fit the body closely, providing better insulation and freedom of movement. This was especially important in cold climates. With good cold weather clothing, humans could survive in extreme environments like the Arctic tundra. This opened up vast new territories for human habitation. Another important innovation was the atlatl or spear thrower, which we mentioned earlier. This simple device dramatically increased how far and how powerfully a person could throw a spear, making hunting safer and more effective. Later came the bow and arrow, which was even better. A skilled archer could shoot arrows rapidly and accurately at prey or enemies from a safe distance. These weapons technologies represent a form of mechanical advantage, using leverage and physics to amplify human physical power. Human creativity was also applied to creating more sophisticated shelters. In treeless environments like open grasslands or tundra, there was no wood available for building. Ingenious humans learned to build shelters from whatever materials were available. In some areas, they built structures using the massive bones of woolly mammoths. They would arrange huge mammoth skulls, jaws, and leg bones to create a circular framework. Then cover this frame with animal hides, weighted down with more bones and rocks to keep everything in place. These mammoth bone houses were surprisingly effective, providing shelter that could last for months or even years. Archaeological excavations have found the remains of these structures, complete with ancient hearths where fires once burned in the center. In other areas, humans dug partially underground pit houses, which provided natural insulation and protection from wind. Earth is an excellent insulator, so being partially underground kept the interior warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Some human groups built more temporary shelters, like teepee-style tents, made from wooden poles covered with animal hides, which could be assembled, disassembled, and carried when the group moved to a new location. The diversity of shelter types shows human adaptability and problem-solving skills, finding solutions appropriate to whatever environment they found themselves in. The creation of composite tools represents sophisticated thinking and planning. A composite tool is one made from multiple parts and materials combined together. A spear with a stone point hafted onto a wooden shaft is a simple example. More complex examples include arrows with carved wooden shafts, stone or bone points, and feather fletching all assembled together, or harpoons for fishing with detachable heads attached to long cords. Creating composite tools requires multiple steps and different skills. You have to make each component, then figure out how to attach them securely using binding materials and adhesives. Early humans used sinew, plant fibers, or thin strips of animal hide for binding. For adhesive, they used tree sap or pitch, which they often had to heat to make it sticky and workable. Making good adhesive from birch bark pitch, for example, requires heating the bark to the right temperature without letting it burn, which takes skill and experience. Composite tools perform better than simple one-piece tools because you can choose the best material for each component. Wood makes a light, strong shaft. Stone makes a hard, sharp cutting edge. Feathers stabilize an arrow in flight. Each material contributes its own strengths, and the result is better than any single material could achieve alone. This kind of thinking, breaking a problem into parts and finding the best solution for each part, then combining them, is sophisticated mental work. As human cultures became more complex, the importance of learning and teaching grew enormously. Each generation could build on what previous generations had learned, rather than starting from scratch. This cumulative cultural evolution allowed human knowledge and technology to advance far beyond what any individual could figure out on their own. Think about all the knowledge required to successfully survive as a hunter-gatherer. You need to know hundreds of different plants, which are edible and which are poisonous, when they are in season, and where to find them. You need to know animal behavior patterns, tracking skills, and hunting techniques for dozens of different species. You need to know how to make fire, how to make and use different tools, how to build shelters, how to treat injuries and illnesses, how to prepare and preserve food, where to find water in different seasons, how to navigate through unfamiliar territory, and much more. No one could possibly figure all of this out alone in a single lifetime. It represents thousands of years of accumulated knowledge passed down through teaching and learning. Children growing up in these societies spent their entire childhood learning from their parents, grandparents, and other adults. They watched carefully and practiced endlessly to master complex skills. The best toolmakers, hunters, and healers would have been respected teachers, passing their expertise to the next generation. This capacity for cumulative cultural learning is arguably the most important thing that makes humans unique and explains our success as a species. Trade and exchange between different groups became increasingly important as human societies developed. Even groups that moved around constantly had favorite territories where they spent most of their time. Different territories had different resources. Maybe one area had excellent flint for making stone tools, but another area had abundant deer. Maybe one group lived near the ocean where they could collect shells, and another lived near mountains where obsidian, a volcanic glass that makes exceptionally sharp tools, could be found. Through trade, groups could obtain valuable materials they could not get in their own territory. Archaeological evidence shows that materials sometimes traveled hundreds of miles from their source, passing from group to group through networks of exchange. Shells from the Mediterranean Sea have been found hundreds of miles inland. Obsidian from known source locations has been found far away. Amber, a fossilized tree resin prized for its beauty, was traded across long distances. These trade networks also facilitated the spread of ideas and innovations. When groups came together to exchange goods, they also exchanged knowledge. A better technique for making a certain type of tool, or knowledge about a new food source, or a useful medicinal plant could spread from group to group through these interactions. Trade probably also served social functions, creating alliances between groups and reducing the likelihood of conflict. Groups that traded with each other had a relationship and a reason to maintain peace. Art became increasingly sophisticated and diverse during this period of human development. In addition to cave paintings and carved figurines, people created rock art by carving or pecking designs into rock surfaces. They created elaborate body decorations using ochre and other pigments to paint their bodies and faces. They made jewelry from shells, carved bone, animal teeth, and stones. Some ornaments were quite elaborate, with beads carefully carved, polished, and strung together into necklaces or sewn onto clothing. The time and effort invested in creating these decorative items shows they were valuable to people. Wearing certain ornaments might have indicated status within the group or marked important life transitions like reaching adulthood, or identified which clan or group someone belonged to. Personal adornment is found in every human culture throughout history and around the world, suggesting it fulfills deep human needs for self-expression, beauty, and social identity. The styles of art and decoration varied from region to region and changed over time, representing different cultural traditions. An expert can often identify when and where an artifact was made based on its style, showing that distinct cultures with their own artistic traditions were well established. Music and storytelling likely played important roles in early modern human societies, though they leave little archaeological evidence. We know they had musical instruments like flutes, drums, and probably rattles made from gourds or animal parts. They almost certainly sang and danced, as these are universal human activities. Music brings people together, creates shared emotional experiences, and reinforces group identity and cohesion. Imagine the group gathering around the fire at night after a long day of hunting and gathering. People would relax, share food, and tell stories. Through storytelling, important knowledge could be passed down. Stories about dangerous situations and how people survived them taught lessons without anyone having to experience the danger themselves. Stories about ancestors and past events created a sense of history and identity. Myths and legends explained natural phenomena like where the sun goes at night, why seasons change, or how humans came to be. These stories probably had spiritual and religious significance, expressing beliefs about the nature of reality, the relationship between humans and animals, and what happens after death. Storytelling is a uniquely powerful form of teaching because stories are memorable and emotionally engaging. A dry list of facts is hard to remember, but a good story stays with you. The human capacity for storytelling is connected to our sophisticated language abilities and our capacity for imagination and symbolic thought. Religious and spiritual beliefs became more evident in the archaeological record during this time. Humans buried their dead with grave goods, suggesting belief in an afterlife. They created art that may have had religious significance, like female figurines that might represent fertility goddesses, or certain animal images that might have been sacred. Some painted caves appear to have been used for ceremonies, with evidence of repeated visits to deep, dark chambers that would have been difficult and somewhat dangerous to access, suggesting these were special sacred spaces. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies find that they invariably have rich spiritual lives with beliefs about spirits, ancestors, and forces beyond the physical world. Early humans probably had similar beliefs. Spiritual beliefs help people cope with the uncertainties and hardships of life. They provide comfort in times of loss and grief. They They offer explanations for things that are otherwise inexplicable, like why bad things happen or what causes diseases. They create a sense of meaning and purpose. Religious beliefs and practices also reinforce social bonds and group identity. When everyone participates in the same ceremonies and shares the same beliefs, it creates unity and helps the group function as a cohesive unit. Some scientists think that shared spiritual beliefs and group ceremonies may have been important for allowing human groups to grow larger than those of other primates, because they created bonds between people who were not closely related. Human innovation continued to accelerate, with new inventions appearing more frequently. Someone invented the concept of projectile points with hafting systems that allowed the point to detach from the shaft when it hit an animal. This meant that even if the shaft fell out or was pulled out, the sharp point would remain embedded in the animal, causing continued bleeding. Humans invented fish hooks, fishing nets, and basket traps for catching fish. They invented snares and traps for catching small animals and birds without having to chase them down. Weaving was invented, allowing people to create baskets, mats, and eventually fabric by interlacing plant fibers. Pottery would come later, allowing for cooking and storage in waterproof containers. Though the very earliest vessels might have been made from materials that did not survive archaeologically, like gourds or tightly woven baskets sealed with tree sap. Each innovation built on previous knowledge and opened up new possibilities. For example, once you have the concept of weaving plant fibers to make a basket, you can apply that principle to make fish nets or fabric. Innovation became self-reinforcing, with each new idea inspiring further ideas. The pace of change, though still slow by modern standards, was dramatically faster than it had been in earlier human history, when tools stayed basically the same for hundreds of thousands of years. Around 15 to 20,000 years ago, a major milestone occurred when some humans began the transition from mobile hunter-gatherers to more settled communities. This did not happen everywhere at once, but developed independently in a few different regions. In areas where resources were particularly abundant and reliable, it became possible for groups to stay in one place rather than constantly moving. Coastal areas with rich marine resources were one such environment. River valleys, where fish runs occurred predictably each year, were another. In these favorable locations, people began building more substantial permanent houses rather than temporary shelters. They invested more effort in their living spaces because they would be using them for years. Archaeological sites from this period show the remains of semi-permanent villages with multiple dwellings, storage facilities, and evidence of occupation lasting years or decades. This more settled lifestyle had profound effects on human society and culture. When you stay in one place, you can accumulate more possessions because you do not have to carry everything when you move. You can invest time in making your home more comfortable. Population density increases because territories can support more people. Social structures become more complex, with more specialized roles emerging. This period laid the groundwork for the development of agriculture, which would emerge later and completely transform human civilization. But that is where the story of early humans ends and the story of agricultural societies begins. Looking back across the millions of years of early human history, we see an incredible journey from ape-like ancestors living in African trees to modern humans spread across the entire globe. Early humans survived predators, harsh climates, food shortages, diseases, and countless other challenges. They evolved physically with bigger brains, upright walking, and bodies adapted to different environments. They evolved culturally with increasingly sophisticated tools, language, art, and social structures. They showed creativity, cooperation, compassion, and courage. Every person alive today is descended from these early humans, carrying their genes and inheriting the world they shaped. When you look at your hands, they have the same basic structure as the hands that first shaped stone tools millions of years ago. The brain inside your skull is the descendant of those early brains that first imagined making a tool or controlling fire. The capacity you have for language, art, music, and symbolic thought was developing in your ancient ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. Understanding our deep history as a species helps us appreciate where we came from and recognize our connection to all other humans, regardless of surface differences. We are all part of the same human family, descendants of those early African pioneers who began the greatest journey in history. Their story is our story, and their legacy lives on in everything we are and everything we do. The challenges they faced taught humanity resilience, innovation, and the power of working together. These lessons remain relevant today as we face our own challenges and write the next chapters in the ongoing human story. Early humans showed us what is possible when curiosity meets determination, when intelligence is combined with cooperation, and when the human spirit refuses to give up in the face of adversity. Their journey from the trees of ancient Africa to every corner of the earth is a testament to the remarkable potential within every human being, potential that began developing millions of years ago and continues to unfold today. Retry.